evening and welcome to the Timber Development UK's University Design Challenge 2022, which is Southside Hereford. TD UK is the merger of the two organisations of TRADA and the Timber Development UK. I could mix that up to start away. It's actually the merger of TRADA and the Timber Trade Federation. This challenge is for students and 2021 graduates studying built environment subjects at UK universities. And we are bringing this to you in partnership with Edinburgh Napier University, NMITE, which is the New Model Institute for Technology and Engineering, and the Passivhaus Trust. We would like to thank our sponsors, Transforming Timber, who's our major sponsor, Accoya, PEFC UK, Passivhaus 15, Stora Enso, the Timber Decking and Cladding Association, Wood for Good, and Rotterblas, and our supporters AECB, Design PH, Trimble, and UFI VocTech Trust. We kicked off last week looking at construction in a climate crisis, and 9 knowledgeable professionals at the forefront of their industries set the scene. I'd recommend you visit our dedicated YouTube channel for disseminating and democratizing this essential knowledge to watch the recording. I'll put a link in the chat, and please subscribe if you can. This year, we're supported by software partners, and each team will have access and training to use the following: SketchUp Design platform from Trimble, Design PH and PHPP from the Passivhaus Institute, and embodied carbon calculator from the AECB. Tonight, we meet the Southside Hereford stakeholders, Belmont Wanderers, Growing Local, and NMITE, to hear about these 3 organisations and their hopes and ambitions for the physical building that our participating teams will design, engineer, specify, and cost to a fixed budget. The site for the physical building is on the boundary of 2 fields and is a greenfield site, formerly a park and farmland. Due to unexpected commitments, we're going to be running in the following order. You'll hear first of all from Belmont Wanderers, then from Nick Grant from the Passivhaus Trust to hear about what makes a sustainable building. This will be followed up by Growing Local and finally NMITE. There will be time for brief questions after each speaker, but if you'd like to put those questions in the chat, then I'll put them to the speakers. And at the end, we invite you to turn on your cameras and ask live questions in person. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Chris Tipping at Belmont Wanderers. Chris. Thanks, Tabitha.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Nice to meet everyone and see everyone. I'll give you a bit of a background on Belmont Wanderers Football Club, CIC. A bit of our history, a bit of our ethos, and then get you to understand where we sit within the Southside project. So to give you an idea, we started off as a grassroots football club, established in 2011 by Dan Pitt. And for many years, we just set as one team. We developed into several teams by about 2015, 2016, when we decided to incorporate into a CIC, and it's when I joined the club myself. From then on, we decided that we needed to work with the council to take on the 17.5 acres of land that we play from, which is what Tabitha alluded to at the very beginning, and sits adjoining with Growing Local. So the 17.5 acres is just basically grass fields. There's nothing else there, grass fields and trees. We took it off the council because they couldn't continue to maintain it. We wanted to take it on and make it into a football pitch or football pitches. It has the capacity to be around about 3 11v11 foot size football pitches, and probably one of the biggest in terms of footed areas or metered areas in the city. Can I go on to the next slide, please, Tabitha? It's weird when you're not doing it yourself. So on the pitch, so just give you get a bit of context of where we've gone over the last 10 years and very much over the last 5 or 6 years. We've amplified our growth massively. So as you can see there, we've gone up to 350 players now from what was basically 20. And we're developing day on day. We're actually turning people away at the minute because we can't facilitate all the players because of lack of facility in the area. So we now have 22 teams, aged from 4 upwards. We've got Nans playing on the ladies teams. We've got youngsters playing on young teams. We cover all age groups across the county. Alongside that, we have 70 volunteers that can go from coaching through to reffing, through to all sorts of different work on the grounds, everything. So, and that again is amplified from just several people to lots of people. You know, we just keep growing all the time, and these people are just giving their time up out of the day to come up and help on our fields. The field is active 6 days a week. There is a day off, kind of, but there's 6 days a week of activities going on there all the time. In the winter, we obviously use a 3G pitch to facilitate the football games and play the games on the weekends at the pitches ourselves. Along our journey, we're very lucky to win, or we worked hard to win various awards, covering regional, locally, nationally awards. They could be things from just winning leagues through to best coaches, best teams, all these different things. There's so many to list. But the important thing is a lot of these people had nothing before this club started, you know, so we've built this whole community project that allows people to come and be part of and then take part in potentially achieving these awards and becoming better achievers in what they're doing. So, and as I say on my bullet points there, many of these children or even adults are going off into better pathways in life, you know, which could be through better education pathways, better employment pathways. I had one person leave a job in retail and go into teaching. So, you know, and they use the coaching ability to improve their career, which is what we're all about at the football club. So it's not just a football club, you know, it's something we're very proud of. The football is the heart of it, but it's the big community aspect that goes alongside it. We are probably now one of the biggest football clubs in the county and the biggest in terms of opportunity to have the facility or potential facility that we're going to have up there. There won't be another club in the county that has that grass area, plus also the other things with the building and everything else. So, which is what we're really trying to get to. So, and we're taking youth, you know, again from we're walking around the streets, you know, into youth leaders, which is what we're really keen on doing and giving them better opportunities. Can I go on to the next slide, please, Tabitha? Okay, again, as I said, we've won various awards. Charter Standard of Club. Okay, so I'm very proud of this slide, and I'm going to say it because it's a selfish slide, but my daughter's actually appears on that picture there, and she's walking onto Wembley with the first ever women's FA Cup game. FA Cup game at Wembley. So so she got to walk out on the field, and that, again, that's through having good connections with the football club. We creating these opportunities. We actually do regular trips down to Wembley when we can, obviously COVID pending, to try and do all these things to take kids away and experience things in life. Again, maybe they don't have that opportunity to do. Our club is situated in the South Wyre area of Herefordshire, which is a beautiful part of the city, but it's also one of the most deprived in the UK. So, you know, or is in the top 10% of that most deprived areas. So, you know, it's really important that we continue to build this, because we're taking stuff into the community that allows people, again, to excel and improve their lifestyle. So we've appeared on TV, local presses, all these different things. The really important point on this slide is that we have over 20 businesses every year supporting the club itself and allowing us to develop and grow. So we're trying to connect with businesses in the community as well. So it means that, again, we can put them pathways into potential coaches or whatever to go into, again, in better employment. So and we've put ourselves on the map, right? So we've gone from being nothing into, like, say, one of the largest. We're continually succeeding. We want to keep growing, keep pushing it forward, but we can only do that with better facility. So, and that's moving on to where we're coming into now. So going on to the next slide, please, Tabitha. Okay, so where we sit, I suppose, with the Southside building is that we want this community hub to be at the centre of everything for ourselves, growing local and NMITE, which I know the guys will talk to you about their parts later. But our biggest part is obviously we need to have the football capability there. So as you can see, we obviously need the standard stuff, which is change rooms, official change rooms, accessible WCs and spectator WCs with potential external access. There is some really strong Sports England guidelines that we have to follow, and we would like to follow, obviously, with this building, because, you know, we have to. They govern everything we do. Plus, it helps us with our other opportunities, which I know that Tabitha will circulate and share out anyway. So, you know, but what's important for us, and we spoke about this the other day, is that I don't want to be just a traditional football club. I really want an area where people can have places to sort of spread good things and enjoy each other's company and talk to each other. I think someone keeps calling them collision spaces, which I know that NMITE and Growing Local are very keen on as well. So we can cross over a little bit, because, you know, traditional methods have proven well and great, but actually we need to change the ethos and develop things a bit better. You know, we're really flipping things on its head a little bit by mixing 3 community projects together. And the overall objective for us is to develop skills in the county. Okay, so taking away the football aspect for us, we're potentially developing coaching skills, refereeing skills, football, strategic thinking, whatever you want to go into to allow people to develop the skills better, same as growing local and NMITE, which I'll talk about later. So that Southside building for us is going to sit pride of place in the community that everyone can use on a day-to-day basis, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So although we want the basic aspects of a football club, there's lots of other things that we want to look at as well if we can. The big one for me, I always say it to every meeting, is I want a bar. We want a bar up there, right? So, so we haven't got one, only because the area we're in, we haven't got many facilities up here. And I joke about it, but it's at the same time, we need to develop the area and make it multi-purpose, multi-use, so we can use it for many different things. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, please, Tabitha. Checking time, doing well. So as I alluded to in the last one, we've got 17.5 acres there. So the red ringed area you can see on the map is primarily our pitch playing areas, and the blue area is actually I want to say redundant, it's probably a poor word, but an area that we've got at the moment we don't use or can't use. So the ringed areas are the main focus. On this map, you've actually got two things on there, which is our car park and what will be the 3G pitch. Next to 1B is where we're hoping to situate the building in between the two fields. That's it, perfect. Cheers, Tabitha. So it'll sit in there, and it's an amazing thing. And if I'm being up to seeing it, you see it. It's you've got a mix mash of urban and countryside. If you look, you literally can just turn 360 degrees, and you can see both perspective, which is just breathtaking. So we want that building to be pride of place in that area there. So, and the big part for us is this forming of partnership with Growing Local and NMITE. To develop part of the skills foundry and really push the skills building in the county. I think that we can, I use the word that's being used by the government is leveling up the area, leveling up the, all these different things. That's exactly, we've been doing that for a decade. People don't necessarily see it so much, but now they're starting to see it, and now we can amplify again. Okay, so we've already been amplifying, let's amplify more. Okay, so and the idea we've got at the point where we said at the bottom there, we're looking to triple our numbers our members over a 5-year period. So we're looking to get 1,000 playing members every year, plus additional people coming in with volunteers and everything else. That's achievable. That's achievable if we have this in place, if we deliver a really good project, and we have the facilities that we need. And this is what the Southside really means to us at Belmont Wanderers. Okay. I really appreciate you all listening to me, guys. I'm going to finish on this note because this is our mantra at Belmont. Okay. As an individual, we are strong. As a team, we are brilliant. As a club, we are unstoppable. We are Belmont Wanderers FC.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
An inspired, pitch to all our all our participants and the room. At the moment, there seems to be no questions. Although, hang on a minute.
They're coming in. They're coming in. This is where I've got to multitask now.
No, so I've got one here. So, Chris, what sort of equipment will you need to store? Will this include the goals or training equipment?
It's a very good question, actually. Yeah, I've probably not covered that enough in a lot of these different things we're doing. So yeah, so primarily it will be goalposts, football equipment. I'm trying to think what we currently use 2 big metal containers for it, and they're not nowhere near big enough. So don't ask me sizes, come terrible things like that. But yeah, but anything to do related to football, we will. If we get a 3G pitch, we will be able to leave some of the goals out. With the 11-a-side pitches, we do have to put them away because it's still a public area, right? So people can't do go up there and play on the pitches, which we don't want to stop. But at the same time, they break our posts and that sort of stuff, being where we are. So yeah, big think 11-a-side goals is probably going to be the biggest things that we're going to need in there. Hopefully they're going to be wheeled and so on. I'm trying to think if anything else would have to be off the top of my head, but yeah, any football equipment really.
Brilliant. And I think you were telling me the other day you have got some buildings that can be repurposed or
well, it's important. So to give you a really sort of big sort of picture of the club, it's been going a long time in different iterations. So it's probably going 30-40 years before my time. In fact, I've got friends from school that played at about what was then called Belmont Rangers, so ran by a completely different person. And they actually had containers put in place many moons ago. The containers are older than me, and that's old, right? So they've got plumbed in electricity and gas, water, not gas, electricity and water. They are changing rooms and they have showers. But unfortunately, they're not very fit for purpose. So, But one critical thing for me is that I'd like to get them repurposed and be part of the identity still. Now, I'm not saying I want them to be the change rooms going forward. What I'm saying is what can we use them for, right? They're really useful them, and they're big. We have 6 of them, you know, and they're very, very big. So, but yeah, absolutely. If we can repurpose them, it'd be really useful.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thanks, guys. If I shoot off, guys, thanks for your time.
So I'd like to hand over now to Nick Grant. I'm just moving all my slides around so I can see, from the Passivhaus Trust and Elemental Solutions. So I first met Nick back in 2015, obviously when I was young, you know, obviously not as young as Chris. Wherever I lost everything, moved on my screen. And this is when I took the Passivhaus training course back in Hereford. And from the moment I met him, I started to understand the interconnectedness of construction and the extent of greenwishing and greenwashing, and how we need to begin to radically simplify things. Nick.
Thanks, Tabitha. I normally like to manage people's expectations. That didn't really help. Sorry, something to live up to. And also I've got a slide on shipping containers, which is, I didn't know about the shipping containers, Chris. So anyway, we'll come on to that. Okay, so Tabitha asked me to give a bit of intro to Passivhaus, but I'm not really going to do that because you can Google that. I think you've had some other talks already, and there's other ones coming along. But I'm just going to, as Tabitha says, trying to give a sort of more general overview. And this is based on some experience of many projects we're working on, student competitions, all sorts of things. So I'm trying to sort of second guess some things might happen. Okay, so one thing that's sort of inspired the original version of this talk really is we'd had people come on course like Tabitha did, and then a couple of years later they'd sort of ring up about something and they'd say, oh, you know, great course, but still haven't had the right client or the right site. And that really worried me because every site, whether it's changing rooms for a football club or a whatever the project is, they all should be sustainable buildings, and that shouldn't be requiring the right client or the right budget or anything like that. So it's got to be for everything. And big wake-up call, Greta, you know, enough blah, 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 and it's been mentioned already, avoiding business as usual. And we've got to get around the excuses. So we've got to anticipate the sort of things that might stop this happening. So whether it's the right site or the right client. So here we've got the right site, we've got the right client, that's great, but it's still got to be simple, it's got to be affordable. Because if this is going to be repeatable, anything to do with sustainability has got to be affordable, it's got to be buildable by ordinary builders, ordinary people. It's got to be normal stuff. It's got to become ordinary. It's got to work. So we haven't got time to reinvent the wheel. We keep seeing sort of things which we saw didn't work in the 70s still being sort of redone. People are trying old things that we'd seen and tried in the 70s and 80s, and that's sort of coming back into fashion again, and sort of head in hands. We can't afford to do that. So we need stuff that's proven that'll work. And this idea of the performance gap is something that's talked about in building circles. We don't really get it in aviation and cars. Airplanes aren't constantly falling out of the sky because they don't get off the ground. But buildings tend to not perform as expected. And this is sort of a bit of a mystery. And that's what inspired Passivhaus. It's just got nothing new. There's no new techniques, no new physics or anything, but the people who set Passivhaus up were physicists, and they were interested in the environmental crisis, anti-nuclear, concerned about climate change, and they couldn't think why sustainable buildings were being built. Why didn't they work? What was this performance gap? Physics, surely if we can put people on the moon, we can make a building that works. So that was what inspired Passivhaus, and that's why a lot of us have got into it, is how to deliver buildings that actually work. So what is Passivhaus? Said before, you're going to have to Google that. I'm not going to tell you all that. But some of the key points are that it's clearly defined targets for performance. That's whether it's energy, comfort, health. So it's not vague ideas about a sustainable building. It's not based on current targets, government targets that may change year on year, or based on current grid carbon or fuel prices or anything like that. There's some fairly fixed targets which we can design to. And it's quality assured at the design process, and with certification, there's a sort of extra eyes sort of checking at design stage, but right through construction, there's checking that what is built and what is designed is built as per design and that it works. And this is all for closing the construction performance gap. And one of the key things which frightens a lot of contractors at first, but it turns out to not be a problem, is airtightness, which is important in itself, but it's also, we find that it because if you're building a building that's airtight, you've got to design it to be airtight. You have to think about how it goes together, how it's going to be built, how all the trades will work together. And that means we get less defects and less problems. So it's not just about the airtightness. It turns out to be a measurable quality standard, which has lots of other benefits. And it's proven over thousands. I don't know how many, I could have checked before I did this talk, how many current certified buildings there are in the world. There's an awful lot of other buildings which are not certified that are still built to the standard. And there's an awful lot. In the early days in the UK, we kind of knew them all, knew all the people. Now we've lost track. A lot of buildings. In Herefordshire, we've got an awful lot of small buildings. We've got the Hereford Archive. There's all scales. We've got architects here who are doing only passive house. And it's not just homes. The name seems to suggest house, but in German, house means building. So schools, offices, museums. I mentioned the archive in Hereford, but hospitals, health centres, all sorts of buildings. I'm not going to go into detail here, but just to say that there are numbers. There's some hard numbers to hit. I mentioned airtightness. These are not numbers that keep moving year on year. It's something you can aim for, and they mostly apply whatever the building, whether it is like this building or whether it's a house, whether it's a hospital. Some adjustments made for very specific buildings, but generally we don't have to reinvent the standard every time for a new building. And 5 key considerations. This applies to any energy efficient building or any sustainable building, but particularly for passive house. First thing is get the form nice and simple. It might look quite complicated on the outside. There might be all sorts of external landscaping and trees and balconies and various things, but the basic thermal envelope wants to be nice and simple. That makes it cheaper. It means we can use, we have less embodied carbon, less embodied materials. We can use simpler materials. We're not relying on steel and concrete so much. We can rely on less energy intensive materials. Following on from the basic shape, getting the glazing optimized. I know it's only a graphic, but the competition graphics of shows fully glazed on 2 sides. Passive house isn't really passive solar. It's about doing the glazing that works for views, daylight, ventilation and everything else, but also got to consider security, privacy and cost and various other aspects and summer comfort. And then the thermal envelope, the insulation isn't particularly thick. It's maybe a bit thicker than building regs, but it's more about it being continuous and being good quality. So we don't have any gaps in the insulation. We don't have any thermal bridges, bits of metal or even timber going through the insulation layer, reducing its effectiveness. And the airtightness I already mentioned is one of the quality assurance measures, but that's very important for the building fabric to be durable, particularly if we're using timber and natural materials, to reduce any risk of condensation in the structure. And having made the building airtight, we can never rely on a leaky building for good ventilation, but we provide every habitable room has to have openable windows, but we also always have background ventilation and for our climate with heat recovery. So that means that even if it's cold and miserable outside or noisy or there's insects, we can shut all the windows and we still have good air quality. And we're finding this now, obviously with guidance to have windows open for COVID. You're finding now as it's getting colder and more miserable, you go into places where the windows really aren't open and they should be, and there's no background ventilation. So with a passive house, yes, you can open the windows, but you can also close them and that's not a problem. So glazing, this is another Herefordshire building, a very nice house. It's south facing, it's fully glazed south facade with an overhang, so classic passive solar, but we don't have to do that. It's a very expensive way to build, and this particular building, it's what the client really wanted. They had the site for it with a view, stunning view, no privacy issues, and the architects really, it was a requirement for the design, and we made it work as a passive house. It's very comfortable in summer, but that's not what we'd normally recommend. So generally, the glazing, any glazing that's below the work surface is not adding to daylight. It costs a lot more than the wall that it's replacing. It's more carbon intensive. People worry about the extra layer of glass with passive house with triple glazing, but really it's about the amount of glass, the amount of frame, the amount of window hardware and so on. So if we can reduce all that and still get good daylight, then that's great. And daylight uniformity is poor. Having a wall of glass doesn't actually give you very good daylight quality. And more heat loss in winter, and then conversely in summer we've got more heat gain. And sure, we can put big brise-soleils and overhangs, but they cost money. They increase, there's extra carbon emissions, there's more structure. They reduce the daylight quality because you don't get sky view. So again, you see we're sort of adding glass and then taking away the benefits. And it needs to be safety glass. So this lower bit of glass, it gets more expensive. And if you're strimming or mowing nearby, chances are that low bit of glass is going to get broken. And it makes airtightness and thermal bridging a challenge, harder to live with. You can see this example on the right of school that the teachers have added some plastic film or paper or something to whether it's for privacy or glare. I don't know this particular case. It's from a website called Happy Facades, but you often see this is blocked out. And it's a bit of a cliche. So I'm going on about this partly because it's just an example of where you get misconceptions about passive house being passive solar, but also just to try and make you think about what is the glass doing? How does it earn its keep? It's expensive stuff. It has disadvantages, but it's really, it's also a very lovely thing as well. So you've got to think about using it very well. Building on the left, passive solar design, not passive house, fully glazed, but lots of measures to try and deal with summer overheating. So on the building on the right, again, Herefordshire, it's a passive house. Has a fair bit of glass there. It's probably got more glazing than it really needs. Very nice quality daylight, but it's designed for views, for daylighting. There's a low window seat there to sit on. It's designed around delight, not around passive solar. And as it says at the bottom, the cost of energy from windows, you'd think it'd be free, but the cost of the windows and everything amortized over the building, it works out a very expensive way to heat the building. But what is important is daylight. And this isn't part of the passive house standard. There's a lot of things aren't. Fire, wheelchair accessibility, there's a whole load of stuff isn't included in the standard, and that's fine. But daylight quality is important. So there's various free tools that are out there. Recommend having a play with these. Yeah, a lot of stuff that's available, very powerful tools, some with more of a learning curve than others. But daylight is important. And to design to make the windows do as much work as possible, that's really what I'm sort of angling for there. I'm going to quote Charles and Ray Eames a bit in this talk. They didn't do any sustainable building, or energy saving wasn't a thing in their time, but they did come up with some very good designs which have stood the test of time. And this quote, at university, I was told that design couldn't be taught. I did study engineering design. We were given various tools, but we were sort of said, look, we can't teach you to design, which was a bit disappointing. But this is the tool that I have found useful, this idea of identifying all the possible constraints and then trying to solve the problems. And out of that, the design emerges, rather than sort of sitting down with a blank piece of paper and trying to design a building. You start with the constraints and then do the handle turning. So for a sustainable building, we have some particular constraints. The skill will be making your own list, and there'll be other ones specific to the building in hand. Already we've had mention of storage and various other, there's going to be a whole load of particular constraints for this particular building. But whatever we do, if it's going to be sustainable, it's got to be scalable, it's got to be affordable, it's got to be simple to build. It's no good coming up with something that requires a very special team. If this can only be for special projects, then it's not sustainable. So even if you have a special budget and a special team for one-off, it won't be, other people can't copy that and repeat it if it isn't seen to be repeatable. So there's something about being fairly ordinary, but in a very special way. And comfortable and healthy. We can't do sustainability by just having no heating and no ventilation and sort of living in stuffy, fuggy conditions. It's got to still work very well. And we need to have low upfront and operating emissions. So there's different ways of talking about embodied carbon and so on, but the terminology gets quite complicated and confusing, and there's lots of crosstalk about things. But I quite like the idea of upfront emissions. So when you make a building, whatever it's made of, even if it's mud and straw, there are emissions associated with that upfront. And then there's the operating emissions over the time, heating, electricity, and so on. So we need to do both, and that shouldn't be a conflict, which we'll come on to. And it has to be durable, easy to maintain, and age gracefully. So you've got to think about that, because their costs, particularly for a project like this, there may be some upfront funding, but then the building has to be affordable, and budgets and finances come and go. The national economy, all sorts of things, whether it's COVID, all sorts of things we can't predict, come along, and we need this building to still muddle through all this and still be easy to run. And it needs to be flexible, because over the life of the building, there'll be many uses. It'll have to grow and be adapted. And just again, the COVID example, buildings have had to cope with creating sort of flexible spaces, bigger spaces, people staying apart. So we've seen restaurants create outside areas and pubs and so on. So you can't predict that stuff. By its very nature, it's unpredictable. And it's got to be loved. If people don't love it, they're not going to look after it, they're not going to use it. So that's key to all this. And I appeal to avoid eco cliches. Lovely, Chris mentioned shipping containers. So yeah, if you've got some shipping containers on site and you find a fantastic use for them, great. But the argument here is to not, there's so many, if you Google sustainable building, there's a lot of shipping container buildings come up, and they're not normally the best thing. In fact, they're probably the worst thing to build a building out of. And the same with green walls and grass roofs, and even what you build the building out of, let that come out of the design process. Don't just jump to what you assume to be sustainable. So cliches are about unthinking. It's not about our own house is made of straw. We've got a grass roof. It's clad with local timber and built with local timber. So on one hand, they're cliches, but we made those decisions for conscious reasons. And avoid innovation, which is a funny one. You probably, if you take my advice on this, you probably won't win any competition because all competitions want to see innovation. Another Eames quote, though, this is innovators last resort, more horrors are done in the name of innovation than any other. And what we mean by that is innovation for innovation's sake. So nice examples from the car. The Mini is probably one of the most innovative piece of industrial design, most certainly one of the top 2 innovative cars ever built. But this came out of not sitting down to innovate. It came out of a list of constraints. We had the Suez crisis, fuel shortage. There was a constraint to make this fit into an envelope of 10 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot. The passenger compartment had to be 6 foot of this. So there's some very tight constraints. It had to use an existing engine. They didn't have the budget to invent a new engine to fit in this radically different new car. And Isagonis introduces constraint of a bottle of vermouth and 2 of gin to fit in the door pockets. So out of that came this classic design, which if you Google classic designs, it'll be in the top 10 of pretty much every list. It became design classic, used by royalty, supermodels, and the everyday public and working people. It was a cheap vehicle. It was my first car. But the new Mini, it kind of superficially looks the same, but there's no reason for it to be that shape anymore. They've copied the style and the shape because it was so successful and so appealing. And yet, ironically, there's no reason for it to be like that. The Mini was like it was originally because of cost saving and these constraints. But the style has sort of stayed. And the 2CV is another example. And with buildings, this is a building at Nottingham where the Passivhaus Trust, we had a board meeting there, and it's a certified passive house. So I'm assuming it performs very well. It's gone through all the performance criteria that I said was so important. But all of us found it a really awful building to be in for our meeting. The windows were at weird angles. There was no real views out. The daylighting was awful. We really didn't enjoy it. And I'm not on the Christmas card list of the architecture department at Nottingham University, having tweeted saying very much the same. But again, you know, I'm not an architect. I've been told before that I shouldn't have an opinion about design because I'm not an architect, but I just, as an ordinary person, as an engineering designer, I just like to make you think about this. And Eames again, really, it's just the very quotable people. This idea they don't do art, they solve problems. Whether it's the chairs or the various things they've made over the years are in design museums all over the world, but they didn't set out to make an object that was going to sit in a design museum. They set out to solve problems, whether it was splints or stretchers made out of plywood or whatever it was. And the key thing, what a really nice thing about this competition is it appeals to, it's asking for integrated design teams. So to try and get people with costing information and construction information on board. And you have to work together from day one. It's no good as a designer coming up with something and then the usual thing happens, everything gets planning, and then it's only when you go out to tender that the real costs come in, and that's kind of too late. So you probably won't have the builder on board. You probably don't even know who the builder is going to be until a late stage, but you need to have them sat in that first meeting virtually. You need to have someone representing how is this going to be built. You've got to understand how is it going to be procured, how is it going to be built, and you're going to have to imagine that through role play or something if you can't actually have builders in there. But hopefully you've got relatives or friends who are in construction, whether they're builders or running construction companies or whatever it is. Really important to talk to them. You have to understand how buildings happen. I mentioned before about the upfront emissions. It's another one of the things that Passivhaus doesn't specifically require, but certainly every project I work on, all the people I know who are doing Passivhaus, we're using timber, we're using low embodied energy materials, we're trying to avoid concrete, and we've got 3 projects on site at the moment with concrete-free foundations. So it's something that's very close to our heart. Friend George, who's down the road in Hereford, his house is Passivhaus, and it's built using a straw system, and our own house, not Passivhaus, but straw. So definitely it can be done, and there shouldn't be a conflict. So this graph here is showing cumulative emissions on the vertical axis, and this is a low energy building, which is clearly defined in the German standard. So we see over time the emissions rise. If we take a Passivhaus building, slightly more, you can hardly see it on the graph, slightly more upfront carbon because it's a bit more insulation and triple pane windows, but very quickly it's got lower emissions over time. However, if we build a low energy timber building, it's 11 years before the Passivhaus shows any benefit. So it shows the importance of the upfront emissions. However, we can build our passive house also out of the same low embodied materials. And here we're running a lower course right from day one. And finally, wood. Great. This wood is key to this project. And so all the projects I work on, we're using timber. Our own house is timber. Wood is great, but remember it's forests that lock up carbon, not buildings. So every time you build a building, it will emit carbon in operation and construction, however much timber you put in it. So the idea of cramming your building with more and more timber, although some people are doing accounting on that and seeming to give negative carbon, we'd say use the timber very carefully, avoid the use of steel, use timber instead of steel and concrete if you can. Minimize the amount of timber as well, because it is very precious and it's better left as trees. More information, Passivhaus Trust, various documents to download for free. There's videos, there's all sorts of information out there. The Passivhaus Plus magazine, excellent magazine. You can get that for free, or I'd recommend you subscribe. It's costs very little. I think it's something like €10 a year. It's published in Ireland. Really worth supporting. And if you can visit buildings, there are open days, Passivhaus Trust open days, Passivhaus open days. We've missed the ones this year. Some were open even with COVID, but going to visit building sites or finished buildings is the most important thing. Talk to people and kick the tires. So thanks for bearing with me. I think I'm just about on time. I was hoping to finish under time to have time for more questions, but just about made.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nick. No, you did. The timing was perfect. One question so far. It must be very difficult to achieve airtightness in busy buildings like schools and especially the one in the competition. Any practical tips to help achieve this?
So did you say in busy buildings or?
Yeah, in busy buildings.
I'm not sure what busy buildings means. Sorry. Go on.
So that busy buildings as in lots of people coming in and out.
Oh, I see. Sorry. No, yeah, the door opening and stuff isn't a problem. So the air tightness is about the fabric. You can still open the windows. It's not a problem. It's not about not having windows opening, not having window ventilation. What's interesting though, when you've got like our house is pretty airtight. It's before we knew about passive house. But in a howling gale, we built a sort of protective porch, which is what you thought you had to have, this sort of porch to stop the wind howling in when it's windy. Turns out you don't, because as long as the back door's shut, when you open the front door, the wind, just because it's got nowhere to go, it doesn't come through. Now, in a school building, we had this in the primary school in Wolverhampton. We found that as a design lesson, if the doors can be jammed open at both ends, you can get howling gales. This leads to, it's not a passive house problem, it's just you can get a sort of wind tunnel effect, and this can lead to doors sort of slamming, and it's sort of risk of small children getting slammed. And that's just a lesson about how wind behaves in buildings. It's not an airtight thing, but as long as you can avoid the sort of through flow of air, you can open the door in the wind and you don't get any drafts, it's fine. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but the airtightness is really about the fabric. Once you've got it airtight, just like in your car, you can then open the windows and you can shut them as well.
Perfect. No, thank you, Nick. I think that does answer it again. It's coming back to understanding what a passive house is and what it isn't. So yeah, any more questions around that, like please ask in person afterwards or pop in the chat. And in which case I'd like to hand over to Lou Foti. And Lou, I keep getting your surname wrong. I do apologize.
Okay.
From Growing Local. So shout at me to change screens.
Okay, so should we go on to my first screen of the presentation, which is the next one, I think. Great. Good evening, everybody. So yeah, my name is Lou Foti, and I'm director of Growing Local, which is a community interest company. I also run all the educational programs that we offer, which I'll tell you a little bit more about as the presentation goes on. Right, can we go on to the next slide, Tabitha, please? Great. So before talking about the actual build and the Southside build, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about our background, so it gives you context of what we want the building to achieve. A little bit like Chris talked about the background to Belmont Wanderers. We've actually been around for a similar amount of time. We were formed in 2009 as a community interest company, which is a not-for-profit organisation. We had the main objective, which we still have now, of connecting people with their local food by encouraging people to grow their own and to buy local produce. We did this initially through delivering hundreds of primary school gardening workshops at a purpose-built educational garden that we developed on a local farm. We also operated a successful veg box scheme, delivering to around 100 households a week. This scheme actually closed a couple of years ago due to a lot of local Herefordshire growers going out of business, which we'll talk about again shortly. Over the last 7 years, since I joined the organisation, we've also had a greater focus on food and cooking. We actually constructed a basic field kitchen at our garden, and that's our garden, our old garden, which I'll talk about some more on the left on the picture here. We constructed a field kitchen, and we got our staff and volunteers also going into schools and going into community centres and running cook workshops. So we work with schools, primary schools, secondary schools, we work with adults, and we work with families, aiming to demystify food and cooking, and demystifying cooking from scratch, and empowering everyone just to give it a go and try new foods, try new vegetables, try new recipes, and giving confidence to people really to make their own food and, you know, to follow recipes and adapt them really and to make them their own. Oh, yeah. So can we go on to the next slide? Great. So 2 years ago, exactly about 2 years ago, actually, we launched as an organisation a very new and ambitious plan that we had for the future. The lease on our farm site was coming to an end, and it actually came to an end this May. And we had, you know, we wanted to grow the organisation. We've got many exciting plans of where we wanted to go. So not only did we want to take our educational programme to a new level and reach even further into our local community of Hereford and Herefordshire, but we could see that many smaller local growers were going out of business, and we were really unhappy about this, and they were struggling. So we wanted to find a way to plug that gap, to find a way to, you know, to feed our local communities, local vegetables again. So the way forward seemed to be to us through a community-owned market garden. So our project at this point was threefold. We wanted to set up a community-owned market garden. We wanted to run a newer and bigger and better facilitated educational garden, and we wanted to have a field to fork cook school and start up horticultural training in the county. So we held, at this point 2 years ago, we started holding public meetings, and in early 2020, I think we had our first meeting, and we had an enormous amount of support. I think we had literally 120 people come out on a really wet, windy, wild Monday evening to support us from all across the city. And then we held regular meetings until COVID curtailed them. The council around this time also came forward, and they offered us some suitable land for our project. And we started talking about a particular 16-acre plot of land that they could potentially asset transfer to us. And this land is actually going to be our new site. We still don't own it. It's currently going through an asset transfer, but that's likely to happen in the next few months. In September 2020, we were invited to put together a bid to Hereford's Stronger Towns Fund for this project. And at the same time, Belmont Wanderers were putting in a bid as well. And it seemed to make sense to put a joint bid in ourselves. And similarly, NMITE also were keen to have a base in this area of the city. So that's how the three of us came to put together this joint building and this joint project. So a bid was formed between the three of us, it was submitted, and it was accepted by the Towns Board and then by central government. So that leads us really as to where we are today. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Thanks. So where is this project? It's in the south of Hereford, which is in southwest England, very near Wales. You can see on this picture here, I've highlighted in green our main growing field and orchard and our smaller growing fields and car park area. So above here, where you see the houses, this is the southern edge of Hereford City. It's actually one of the most deprived parts of Herefordshire and deprived parts of the country, actually, these particular housing estates here. But when you get over to our sort of where you can see our main growing fields and orchards, the view to the south It's absolutely stunning. It's beautiful. You have to sort of experience it to see it. And when I put this presentation together, I realized I hadn't actually got a fantastic picture of the view, but I must go up there in the spring and get one, because it is absolutely stunning. So particularly on the slightly higher ground where this building is going to be, you have some glorious views out across the county. The project's really well connected. It has a footpath coming from the city all the way out, and that footpath goes to all areas of the city actually, so it's fantastic. And it's also an amazing cycle route. There's good bus routes there, and as you can see, so you can see Belmont Wanderers to the north. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this area here is where the football grounds will be. Excellent. Right, can we go on to the next slide, please? Right, so this, I think you've seen this graphic a few times now. This was actually drawn as part of the bid to government earlier in the year. It gives you a little idea of how we could look. It's not definitive, it's not to scale, but it gives an idea of how it will be set up, really. Excellent. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about the entire project before focusing on the Southside building. I just also wanted to say the Southside is the only element of the design competition that you will be involved with, but I just wanted to explain a little bit more about our whole bid and our whole project, really, so it just puts the building totally in context of what we're about. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So much of our land is going to be taken up by community market garden. And as you can see here, actually, these pictures are all of our previous garden. Actually, just as Chris has, I just realised I've got my son on the left there. He'll be very embarrassed if he saw this. So these are pictures of our vegetables in our previous garden. So the market garden is going to be, it will be chemical free, using agroecological growing methods to maintain healthy soil, and maintaining healthy soil and ecosystems and encouraging biodiversity are hugely important to us. The market garden will be run as a community supported agriculture enterprise, which is a growing model of community growing. Similar projects seem to be appearing all over the country at the moment. They're actually very big in America, but this model is really coming over here and being adopted by people. We're actually one of 8 peri-urban projects that are currently being mentored by the Community Supported Agriculture Organisation, and also through a group or cohort of very experienced growers. What it means is participant households that become part of our scheme, they'll own a share in our market garden, like a crop share. And they'll receive each week a vegetable box all year round, 52 weeks of the year. By making this commitment, an annual commitment, they share the risk. They share the risk with the grower, which would be us. So in poor growing seasons in the winter, there'll be less fruit and vegetables. In abundant months and seasons, the vegetables will be much more plenty. But if we have the main point is, if we have a really bad growing year, then the crop shares unfortunately have to take the brunt of that, so the farmer or the grower don't lose out. So we're going to aim at growing vegetables for around 200 households. They'll be of different sizes, and we'll also be producing additional produce for the cafe and farm shop. And the garden will also offer lots of volunteer opportunities. It'll encourage member households to come along, take part, and to take ownership of the land and come along as much as they want. It'll also create employment opportunities for growers and many apprenticeships as well. And we'll be hosting all year round events and open days. Next slide, please. The educational garden, which will be a much smaller proportion of the land, will be set up a little bit like our existing garden that we have had for the last 11 years, but about double the size, so that we can have much bigger groups and we can reach a lot more children and adults. Just like our existing garden, it will have polytunnels, it'll have sheds, central seating area, and lots of really interesting raised beds of different sizes and structures. It'll have an outdoor cooking area, a fire pit, a field kitchen, and strong visuals, displays and signs throughout to encourage independent visits, to encourage children to bring their families on weekends to have a look around and show them what they've grown and what they've actually done as part of their session with us. It will be accessible for everyone, all ages and all abilities. Our main target visitor will, however, be primary school groups. Yeah, just to point out as well, these are this is again our garden, and these are some of the workshops that we've run in the past on these on lovely sunny days. Right, can we go on tab please, the next one? So what are we going to offer in our garden? Similar programs to our previous programs, but we're going to reach a lot more schools, more families, more adults, and some new workshops. We'll continue with our schools program of gardening and harvest cook sessions and on-site cook workshops in our educational garden or Southside, the new Southside building. All of these will be available to community groups too. We're also going to offer smaller group sessions for special educational needs schools or groups or nurture classes, which is what we currently offer anyway. We will deliver a programme of weekend and holiday workshops for children and families, and a summer holiday scheme as well. So visiting groups can also go on farm tours. They can look around the community market garden, our orchards and beehives. They'll also take part, children will also have the opportunity to take part in wildlife workshops, art workshops and forest school type activities. So the food educational programme will be fully integrated with the new Southside Cook School, which I'm going to come on to soon. And during all the cook workshops, visitors will get to pick the produce they cook with straight from the garden. We want our visitors to understand and connect with where their food comes from, how it grows and what's in season and how it's picked. We'll also offer a package of adult gardening education, both short courses, apprenticeships and NVQs, bringing back adult education to adult horticultural education to the county. Because right now, unbelievably, for a massively producing county like Herefordshire, there isn't any formal horticultural education. So now we come to the Southside build and what we want this building to achieve for us, our uses for it. I think we've covered a few of these points already. This is obviously the only focus of the design competition that you need to particularly think about. I was just trying to give context to what we're about. This is going to be a new hub building, be shared between ourselves and NMITE and Belmont Wanderers, accessible on our side of the project as a field to fork cook school, a farm shop and a cafe. On Belmont Wanderers and NMITE as a sports and skills centre, offering changing rooms, a bar, a clubhouse, meeting and training rooms and a package of short courses. These pictures here, I should point out, they're only ideas that I plucked off the internet of how the building could look, and we obviously they really were pulled out of nowhere. So just to give people an idea of what we thought might be the potential look. So key to the building, absolutely critical, is it has to be sustainable. Ideally, passive house is what we've always wanted. It must be energy cost efficient, and running costs need to be absolutely minimal. We need it to be known for its sustainable innovation, really, above anything else. It needs to blend into the environment it's in, which is a peri-urban environment, but also a rural environment. Interestingly, on the football side of the project, you can see vistas of the city and you can see housing, but from our side you could be 20 miles out of the city, so it'd be interesting to see how that building will capture those two locations. It's likely to be a single story build. We don't know that for sure because we're waiting to hear on planning, but I think that's very likely, and I think we'd probably rather it was single story anyway. And it needs to enhance the landscape that it's in as well. Great. On the next slide. So what do we as Growing Local want our building, this part of our building for? Predominantly, the main square meterage will be on our Field to Fork Cook School. Little bit unique. I'm not sure there's quite a project exactly like us in the country with such big gardens and market gardens connected to a cook school. So this really will be a whole new, very exciting new innovation. What are we going to offer? So the main cook school is going to offer primary school workshops, secondary school workshops. It's going to offer after school cook clubs, like a healthy dinners club. We already operate quite a few of those. Children that really need it will come and help cook their own dinner. Basically, children that probably aren't going to have parents at home that are going to cook, or their parents might not be there, which we find it happens in this part of the city quite often. We're going to offer lots of weekend family opportunities, like a Saturday brunch clubs, pizza days, family cook days, where children have to bring parents or carers along and we cook together, a lunch or a dinner. We'll also offer children's weekend and holiday schemes. We'll also offer adult cook clubs and adult short course cook clubs. And we need this room also to be hireable for as a private cook school, and for supper clubs as well as in the evenings. Anything to gain extra income, really. And of course, all of these workshops will utilise produce that we've grown in our educational garden or the market garden, Field to Fork cookery. So key to the design of this space is its wide customer base. As you can see, we're going to have a huge breadth of use. The cook school is going to be used by 5-year-olds, as it's going to be used by adults. We envisage having about 10 different cook stations so that we can serve around maximum 35 people in this room. The cook stations need to be fully movable and fully height adjustable, because obviously the needs of a 5-year-old are going to be different from a 6'5" person, adult. We need circulation space in it, and central cooking facilities, and a central eating space as well. So the school is going to offer not only free sessions and subsidised sessions, but also full cost recovery private courses. So it needs to look the part as well. It needs to look pretty special. At the cook school's heart will be our strong ethos of Field to Fork cookery. Everything we produce will use our fruits, our vegetables, our herbs, and they'll all be picked as part of the session. And all other produce will be sourced as locally as possible too. Herefordshire meats, eggs and cheeses. We want our current and future generations to really connect with their food. This is the reason we're doing what we're doing. We want people to learn how to grow their own, to think about shopping locally, and think about buying locally produced food, and to know what's in season, and to know really the basics of cookery, and to have that confidence to cook from scratch, to budget their family meals, to understand how to prepare vegetables, to identify vegetables, to know what they are, how to make a sauce, how to butcher meat, and how to use up any leftovers, or even bake a loaf of bread. These are, in our opinion, vital skills that seem to be lost over many generations. So, this is our main ethos really, and our main, this is our heart of Growing Local, of what we try to achieve. Right. So what else are we going to do at the Southside, the Growing Local part of the building? We will we'll have a further teaching classroom. They'll be used for our horticultural courses, or art workshops, or theory sessions. Also a dry area to shelter in bad weather, because quite often we do have terrible weather, as everyone does. And when you've got a group of 35-year-olds, it can get a bit tricky out there in the garden. So it'll also be used, that extra classroom, as it'll have a private hire use as well, to bring the centre some extra income. On site, we'll have a catering kitchen. and that'll be catering for Southside events, but also other local events using all Herefordshire produce and our own fruit and vegetables. Again, that'll bring income to ourselves. There'll also be a farm shop selling not only our surplus produce, but other local growers and Herefordshire producers. There'll be a cafe, which we're really excited about. This is going to overlook the garden and overlook the countryside. We're seating inside and outside and overlooking the gardens, as I said. Again, this will showcase what we're about with our fields of thought cookery, using all our vegetables. There'll also be a small office area, toilets, changing facilities, a boot room, cloakroom, bringing, obviously children are going to be coming in straight from the garden with really muddy boots, so we need some facility that they can take their boots and their coats off, otherwise environmental health get quite upset by mud. And also we are going to have this fantastic building, so we need to keep it as clean as possible. That is quite important to us. Yeah, and I guess the other thing I really wanted to emphasize, this is a community building. It's a community project. We're all about community and working with everybody from all parts of the community. And I think this building's got to, it's really important that people feel comfortable with it. They feel they own it. They feel it's theirs. The building has to have that feel about it. So I think that's all I've got to say. Has anyone got any questions, Tabitha?
Well, thank you, Lou, for that. That was very comprehensive. There was one question, and as soon as it popped up into the chat, it got answered. You answered it. It was like, how many workstations? It was like, you said 10. How many, in the cook class? And you said like 30. So, yeah. But any more questions, please, pop them in the chat. And can I hand over to James Newby from NMITE?
Thank you, Tabitha. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. I've had to follow Lou a couple of times on these presentations. I haven't had tea yet. I always feel really hungry when I see all those beautiful pictures of produce and all the kitchens and the cooking. So thank you, Lou, for whetting the appetite. I think my job is to give a quick 5-minute overview of NMITE as a partner to this project, and then I'll go on and spend 2 or 3 minutes just talking about how that relates to what we need from the building and our philosophy for the building design and how we use space. So if we just move to the next slide, Tabitha. So NMITE, unlike the other two partners, NMITE's quite new in terms of being an organisation and quite new to Hereford as well. So I think we're behind our other two partners in our activities. We're still building from our early beginnings. And NMITE was really set up to solve or to contribute to solving two really quite significant national problems and one quite significant regional problem. And the two problems are that we don't produce enough engineers in the UK. We don't produce enough engineers in our universities who are ready to go out and work from the point at which they graduate. So they tend to need much more training in the engineering professions after they leave university. So NMITE's job is to produce engineers who are taught in a different way, who learn their discipline in a different way, and are therefore much more employable when they go out into the employment market. The second big problem we do want to solve in the engineering field is that there aren't enough female engineers. It's very, very imbalanced in terms of gender and in student cohorts, and that then feeds through into the engineering professions. So whereas females do very well in higher education generally, there isn't a disparity between genders in higher education generally. There is still a really stubborn disparity in gender in the UK for engineering students. So we're trying to address that as well. So much of what we do is designed to try to encourage more female participants in our engineering courses. And of course, the other big problem we're set up to contribute to is this levelling up problem, and the fact that Hereford, the place we're located, is what we often call a higher education cold spot. It's one of the few counties in England. In fact, I think it's one of the only counties in England without a higher education institution of its own. Hereford doesn't, until NMITE came along, didn't have its own university. No other county, or almost no other county in the UK can say that. And that has really quite profound and significant social mobility consequences, which we'll talk a bit about later. So we're kind of placed in Hereford for very deliberately and for a very specific purpose, and that is to help with the economic regeneration of the city of Hereford and the county that it's in as well. So if you could just move us on, Tabitha. The solution to those problems, the way we aim to solve those problems, is building this new university. So we're the new model Institute for Technology and Engineering. You can think of us as a university. It's effectively what we are. But we work in a completely different way. Our whole approach to learning the discipline is skills-based, it's hands-on. We don't teach in lecture theatres, it's challenge-based, so our students learn their trade through the application of practical challenges and by being involved in real-world challenges. Those challenges are brought by employment partners and industrial partners, so students learn what the world of work feels like, and the way that most engineering problems are truly multidisciplinary. They're not normally single disciplinary problems, so you need that really balanced and wide world view when you're trying to solve engineering issues. And for that reason, we don't insist that our students have the traditional maths and physics A-level that most undergraduate engineering courses in the UK require. We do have quite a rigorous and quite a selective admissions process because we want students to come onto our courses that thrive, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need to have maths and physics at A level. We teach the maths throughout the program, and we teach it in that very applicable, applied way. So that's how we deal with that. And of course, our program that we're teaching at the moment, and most of the new programs we develop, were accelerated and taught in a different way. So accelerated means we don't have long summer holidays. We compress the whole program into a shorter time span. So our students learn a 4-year program compressed into a 3-year time period. So they're out in the workplace a year earlier than most of their peers at other institutions. That's incredibly important as well. So our partnership with industry, our real world and hands-on based learning, all of those are really important. And that's part of the solution. You'll see how the skills-based element comes in a minute, because the skills development is the crucial levelling up intervention that NMITE aims to make. So Tabitha, if we could move us on. So we've talked about the economic deprivation and the economic challenges of the area that we're talking about now, and there are various measures of economic progress or economic deprivation. The one we use in higher education is typically about access and participation in higher education. You know, how many 18-year-olds from a region end up going to university? That's obviously important for us, but it's important for the country and government and for regions too, because it's a really important measure of social mobility. If you go to university, you are far more likely to end up in well-paid employment, in knowledge and skills-based jobs, in higher value jobs. It's much, much more likely that your children will also go to university, and you build this virtuous circle of economic development and wealth creation that's incredibly important. And it's really all about that intervention in skills, the right skills for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. So good universities are very focused on those. We look at the map on the screen now, you can see that the more blue the area is, the higher the number of 18-year-olds from that area that go to university. These are divided into quintiles. So the south side of Hereford is deep, deep red, and I've circled it in the blue circle there. It's the lowest quintile in the entire country. So the number of 18-year-olds in that south part of Hereford that go to universities anywhere in the country, that leave Hereford and go off to university, is lower than any other quintile in the country. And you can see from the geography here that the sort of nice blue areas are generally the rural countryside areas where the population's low, but the participation rates in HE are high. And where there's a more densely populated area like the city of Hereford, then the participation rates are low. So actually what that means for Hereford as a county is very, very few of its 18-year-olds go off to university. That really holds the county back. Tabitha, let's move us on. So I'll talk about the interventions and skills in a minute, but I just wanted a couple of slides on the space and why it's so crucially important to our whole teaching and learning philosophy at NMITE. The configuration and design of space in universities is something we think about all the time. And NMITE, because of the way we manage our learning and the way we deliver our programs, we do it in a very different way, and therefore our space requirements are very different. And the space, the way you design internal space in buildings is profoundly important to the way students learn and to the messages they get about how they learn. You look at the examples here, these are kind of traditional university spaces. And I can almost hear someone saying shh on the left. You know, you would walk around that building in tiptoes. It's really telling you that the way you interact and behave in that building is that you keep quiet. And quite a lot of universities have that. I think Nick might approve of all that timber being used there, but you know, I still don't think it makes for a very good modern skills-based learning experience. And on the right, we have those big traditional lecture theatres. And again, you know, that's sending out really important messages about how you learn, that you learn individually, that if you collaborate with the person on your left or right, that might even be considered cheating. It's really not the same kind of learning that we aim to do at NMITE. So Tabitha, if you can move us on to the next slide. We have a completely different approach. Our space requirements are quite simple, but it's incredibly important that they facilitate this kind of collaborative hands-on learning that's so important to our approach and to our students. We want our students to collaborate and to talk to each other. We want them to be challenging and argumentative. And I can assure you, we've got our first intake of students now, and they are indeed challenging and argumentative. But generally, we want that. Not all the time, but generally, we want that. But it's very important the space enables them to express their views and to share and work together in teams. So some examples of the way we configure our space on the screen there. You can see these students talking to each other. You can see them working together. This is how work works. This is how engineering is done in the world of work. And this is really what we want to teach our students. So let's move us on, Tabitha. So we talked about those interventions and the focus on skills. That social mobility issue I was describing earlier can really be summed up by this kind of vicious cycle of decline that counties like Hereford should grapple with all the time, and local authorities in these sorts of counties have to grapple with this. There's a kind of magic bullet, which is if you can develop the right skills to engender employment, then you create a sort of virtuous cycle of progression, and that's what this project will contribute to. So the sorts of interventions you need to make to break that cycle really do focus around skills, which could be technical skills that we might teach, or it could be those social skills that you gain from being part of a football club, or it could be the skills you learn in a different field that Lou talked about earlier. None of those skills are any less important than the others, but they are all skills that will help young people develop and will help create that kind of employable workforce that can break that cycle of decline that this county does risk. And we want to focus on things like sustainability, simply because it's obviously crucially important for reasons everyone will fully understand, but it's a huge market for skills as well. It's a huge, people skilled in developing sustainable projects are much more attractive to employers than people who aren't. So what we'll get if this project works is we'll have that we've got that slightly overused graphic of the Southside Hereford project that I put in as well. We'll get that outcome there, but what it will deliver is this enabling facility that will allow us to intervene and develop skills in a various range of ways through coordinated programs, and this really high quality facility that the community can use and be proud of. And it will be placed in a community where it's needed most. So the big misunderstanding about social mobility is it relates to geographic mobility. It really doesn't. It's all about skills and mobility up the kind of social ladder, if you like. So we're not going to expect people from the south side of Hereford to travel to us to engage in our skills programs. By having this project there, we can go to them, and that's the important part. So my final slide, Tabitha, just to sum up, these are the requirements. I think all of that boils down to, we want a building that's architecturally interesting. That doesn't mean it has to be idiosyncratic in its aesthetic design. It just means needs to be interesting enough. Give us something we can talk about. Maybe it's in its unique performance, but that's what we want, a wow factor. We want to be able to brag about this building. And it does have to be a shared facility, and people with muddy football boots and wellies from the allotment and trainers, because that's what students generally wear, will all have to travel the same corridors. So the materials need to be mindful of that. The design of it needs to be mindful of that. We want this building to be accessible to the community that surrounds it. We don't want to go and develop skills and outreach programs in an area that needs it most, but make them feel uncomfortable about entering the building because it doesn't blend well enough, or it feels like an island in their estates. We want it to be welcoming. We need it to be genuinely sustainable for all the reasons we've talked about earlier on, but not least because we don't want to have to invest millions of pounds in long-term maintenance because the building wasn't designed in a sustainably or it wasn't future-proofed sufficiently. And we want it to do no harm to that region that it's going to be placed in. Young doctors are taught by their professors that their key rule is that they must do no harm. And I think it's a good lesson for architects and town planners and engineers as well. We don't want to build a spectacular, wonderful building. We don't even want a particularly successful program of events to go on in it if it's blighting the lives of the neighbours who have to live in it through new traffic congestion that's an unintended consequence of the project, or some other form of environmental degradation that could easily take place. And we want the costs contained. So the cost element of this project is really important. And I've seen this 1,000 times where we have a really inspirational project that everybody is passionate about. And then you spend the next year value engineering it down to budget, and you end up sort of value engineering it back to mediocrity from something that everybody was excited about. So we want a building that can inspire in its design, but also remain inspiring throughout its development, and most importantly, its delivery. And Tabitha, that's it for me. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you all today, and thank you for listening. I'll happily take any questions as well.
Thanks, James. That is, yeah, I haven't got the A levels. Can I come?
Neither have I, actually.
There we are, admitting this all publicly. So let me move the screen on. Happy to take any questions. This is where we can throw the floor completely open. I'm going to stop sharing screens for the time being. I'll come back and share it again in a minute. And maybe you've got questions for each other. So please feel free to turn your cameras on and or ask any question. I know you can put hands up, maybe that might be easiest. You don't necessarily have to turn your camera on, but you can ask questions. All very quiet.
Sound of silence.
Nick, have you got a question maybe for
I was just going to say, if there are any non-engineers who don't know what value engineering is, you should Google it, because it's what engineering's about. That's what I was taught at the university in the 1980s. So it's kind of key to me. It's the key to engineering. So anything good is value engineered in the genuine sense. But in construction, it seems to have been taken to mean cost cutting, which is a completely different thing. But yeah, actual value engineering is kind of the nub of it, really. Which avoids that cost cutting at the end, because it's been done at the beginning, which is, that's the graph. See, Tabitha was smiling, because I normally do a talk on value engineering.
That's why I often ask you about, and again, it is so important. No, thanks for clarifying that, Nick. And I know we will we will have talks about, you know, about value engineering and contracts, and where do you start and where do you sort of finish with that to get the right outcomes. Nick, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, could you talk a bit about how you envisage sharing the spaces? So you've talked individually about what you want from what you individually want from the space, but what do you see as being able to share those spaces?
Tabitha, are you going to be sending out the information on the document that I sent to you?
Yes, we are. So that will come out in general.
Yeah, it will become a little bit more clear, because we have obviously had quite a few conversations between the three organisations. There will be quite a few shared areas. There'll be some areas, obviously, that sort of the football's changing rooms won't be a shared area, and our main teaching cook schoolroom won't really be a shared area, just because predominantly it will be used by primary school groups, so we can't have access at all times, but there will be certainly lots of sort of circulation space, and there'll be the cafe will be usable by everybody, and there'll be meeting rooms and events rooms, the training rooms, they'll be usable by everybody, but I think that will become more obvious when the information is shared with everybody.
Thanks for that, Lou. It's yeah, you've all worked out your square meterages, and there's about 800 square meters, and yeah, it's delineated how, you know, how much space sort of for each. But you've got no real, apart from yours being on the south side, you've got no real requirement. Not requirements. You haven't set anything in stone. It's up for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's be quite normal for an architect to get us round a table and maybe share ideas about, you know, movable walls or designs that might enable sharing that, you know, that would otherwise be impossible. I mean, we'd be open to that. There are some constraints relating to things like safeguarding that Lou's referring to, you know, with sports changing and young children and things like that do require a separation that the law requires for other reasons. But apart from that, we're happy to be corralled into a different operational arrangement that might allow a better building.
Yeah,
if there is such a thing.
I'm just trying to open and share a screen that will show you just some of the information that you provided. Let me just get that up. So this is what you were talking about when you potentially want to be using it. So it's broken down into building usage times. So you're giving them all guidance on that. And then the Southside spaces here, the Food and Horticultural Skills Hub, the NMITE Future Skills Hub, the Football Club, and then the communal spaces. And this is the total area. So hopefully that explains a bit more. No more questions? Oh, Oshan's put his screen on. Yes, Oshan.
Good evening, all. I suppose this is a question I asked Chris, but actually it's applicable to kind of all the stakeholders, really. And it relates to individual formalized plans for the future, and kind of, I'm aware that obviously this is probably a wish list for the next, could be short term, could be 10 years, could be 20 years, could be 50 years, but I mean, I'm thinking, put my engineering hat on here and saying that if we're designing anything like a stadium or anything like that for a football club, we're probably looking at a 120-year design life. So I'm just wondering if there are formalized documents for, I suppose, Lou, your portion, as well as Chris and Nick, if I'm correct.
I don't think we have anything formalised of the actual lifetime of it. do we? I don't think we have anything down in writing yet, James, do we? We all obviously have long-term ambitions. This isn't a 5 or 10 year plan. This is something much longer. But we haven't sort of planned that far ahead. But the building will be a building that's it's got to last 100 years plus.
We definitely want it to cross generations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether that's 60 years or 120 years, I'm not really sure. You might need to, you might need to advise us, but we want it as a long-term, sustainable, multi-generational building.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm really getting at here is, I mean, naturally, this sort of project is medium to long term, but there may be other goals outside of that you may wish to hit. I'm just wondering if that's formalized anywhere.
Can maybe answer some of those. So we are asking participants to look at all sorts of things, which we will share in the more detailed brief. But let me just go back up my screen. The design needs to be easy to construct, maintain, and have a long life. Consideration should be given to modern methods of construction, designed for manufacturing assembly, for maintenance, replacements, adaptability, longevity, and end-of-life scenarios. Ease of disassembly plus circularity and the reusability of the components, the fixtures, and fittings all should be considered. Yep, does that get your option? Yeah, I thought that's what you're aiming at. It's about, managing people's expectations all at the moment and bringing it all together. Now, I've had a question in the chat saying, can we contact you and the stakeholders again? So I'm your first point of contact because I'm sure everybody doesn't want to receive loads of emails. The more detailed brief will come out and I've put my email in the chat. And we will just round up with a couple of slides. Let me try and share screens again. And share screen, and then I want to shut this down, that one. So I've got the questions. So with Southside Hereford, it's to be a single physical building that will provide a vibrant and inspiring and inclusive sports, food and skills community focal point for the people of South Wye. And it's for the collaboration of the 3 stakeholders, all of whom share a common goal to improve the future health, well-being, life chances and employment skill sets of the people of South Wye and Hereford. The community centre that houses the 3 stakeholders will enhance the local biodiversity, regenerate the lives of the people that own, use and visit it. It needs to be climate ready and cause minimal impact to the site and to the planet. And the wording in just a slightly different format, the aims and ambition. And Nick will hate this because it's got the innovative word in there. The priority is an innovative, sustainable, inclusive, functional building that performs. Aesthetics is secondary, but the building must blend into its surroundings, enhancing the biodiversity and landscape rather than detracting from it. The building needs to be adaptable, have private areas and public collision spaces, but most of all, it needs to be loved by the owners, the users, and the community that it serves. We kick off again in January. From the 7th of January, we've got quite a lot of students signing up. We go to our virtual pub. And Oshan must well remember from last time, we basically get together on a Thursday or Friday evening, and it's a really informal chat. We try and figure out who works best with whom. We'll then be starting with webinars from the 18th of January, normally going to be Tuesday and Thursday evenings about this time. And on the 18th of January, we start with Tomorrow's Timber. I literally started booking the speakers and I'm really excited. I was excited about tonight, but yeah, we've got a fabulous range of people lining up to come and share their knowledge and hard-earned, information with you. And so with that is, the Timber Development UK Southside Hereford University Challenge 2022. I would be so pleased if you would share it as wide as possible. We're hoping to engage up to 30 teams, and that is 240 spaces for our future design professionals.